If you don't come home right now, I'm going to start divorce proceedings." He didn't know those words would detonate something in me that had been waiting quietly for years, or that he'd just handed me the door I'd been too afraid to open myself. "My name is Tasha Green, and I'm 29 years old. I met Malik at a party I almost didn't go to. My roommate had dragged me out on a Thursday night when I had 3 chapters of Toni Morrison left to read and a midterm on Friday morning. I went because she looked at me with those particular eyes, the ones that said you never come out anymore, and I couldn't argue with that. He was standing near the bookshelf. That was the first thing I noticed. Not his face, but the fact that he was actually reading the spines. Most people at parties used bookshelves as backdrops. Malik looked like he was cataloging them. He was 27 to my 21, a master's student in economics, smart, deliberate, the kind of man who ordered wine by the glass instead of reaching for whatever was open on the counter. I told myself these things were signs. We talked for 3 hours that night about everything except economics. He asked what I loved. I said literature. He didn't laugh or pivot to something more practical. He asked, "Who are you when you're doing what you love?" That was the part I kept coming back to later, that he had asked who the real me was. After graduation, I went to business school, not because I wanted to. My father had spent most of my senior year delivering variations of the same speech. "You need something stable, Tasha, something real." And I had eventually stopped arguing. I was good with numbers anyway. I could learn to love what I was good at. Malik and I moved in together after a year of dating. By then, he had started commenting on my clothes. Small things at first. "That color washes you out. Those shoes don't really go." I told myself it was because he had good taste. I told myself it was because he paid attention. Not many men paid attention. We got married when I was 24. He was 30. I wore a dress he had picked. After we married, he moved all of his stuff into our condo. And even though I was the one paying the mortgage, the condo felt like his, in the sense that his opinions lived in every corner of it. The furniture, the rugs, the art on the walls, all chosen by Malik because his eye was better, he said, and because he had more free time while I was at work. He wasn't wrong about the free time. After finishing his coursework, he had pivoted back into research, back into fellowship applications, back into the comfortable machinery of academic deferral. I was a business analyst, had been with the same company for 4 years by the time of the 4th Thanksgiving. Consistent raises, 2 bonuses, both substantial enough that I had quietly moved one of them into a savings account I didn't mention at dinner. I paid the mortgage. I paid most of the utilities. I did most of the cooking and the cleaning. Malik washed the dishes maybe once a month and then would look at me with a kind of gratitude-seeking look afterward that I had learned not to reward with too much enthusiasm. The house looked like his. It ran on mine. The first Thanksgiving with his family had been fine. I did all the cooking. His mother, Sandra, had said the turkey was moist. His brother, Malcolm, had taken seconds of the pecan pie. His father had nodded in that particular way older men nod when they have nothing bad to say. After they left, I felt like I had passed a test I hadn't been told I was taking. The second was quieter. The compliments were briefer. I noticed, but filed it away. The third Thanksgiving, they ate and said nothing at all. I moved through the kitchen afterward, stacking plates, listening to them laugh at something on television, and I thought, this is strange. I thought, maybe they were tired. I thought a lot of things that weren't the truth. The 4th Thanksgiving, Sandra said the turkey was a little dry. Malcolm said the mashed potatoes needed more salt. Sandra came back around to the pecan pie. Too sweet, she said, too cloying, like something from a box. Malik said nothing in my defense. He refilled his glass. That was the moment. Not a snap. More like a chalk line, drawn slow and deliberate, dividing what I had been telling myself from what I had been living. I finished the dishes. I said goodnight to everyone with a smile I had been practicing for years. That night I decided I was done cooking Thanksgiving dinner for this family. I told Malik a week later, quietly, at the kitchen table, the way I said most things that mattered to me, measured, careful, already braced for the turbulence. "My family didn't mean anything by it," he said. "They were just being honest." "Fine. Then they can be honest at their own table. Next year they can host, or we can all do our separate things." He called me rigid, said I was making something out of nothing, said I had a problem with his family that I had never wanted to admit. The conversation ended the way most of our conversations ended, with me going quiet and Malik believing that meant he'd won. But something had shifted. Over the following months, I started watching things I had trained myself not to see. The way Sandra always commented on my independence with a particular thinness around her mouth, like independence in a daughter-in-law was a character flaw she was too polite to name directly. The way Malik, after every visit with Malcolm, came home sharper, more critical. Once he looked at me across the living room and said, "You know I could do a lot better." He said it casually, like it was a thing people said. I didn't respond. I went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in years, let myself think clearly. What is this, actually? There had been fellowships for Malik, where he had had to travel and be away from home for a while. 2 of them, maybe 3 if you counted the conference extension he'd tacked on to the second one. Each one between 1 and 3 months. Each one mostly silent on his end. While he was away, there had been no calls, minimal texts, and when I pushed back on that, he said the word needy, the way some people deploy a blade. Small, but precise. He traveled for his education and research, and I said nothing. I was supposed to understand. I did understand. What I hadn't understood, until now, was how thoroughly the understanding had only ever moved in one direction. I was tired. Not the tired that sleep fixes, the tired that settles into the spine. The tired that shows up as a recurring cold you can't shake, as a jaw that aches in the morning, as a version of yourself you barely recognize in photographs. I started watching a woman on YouTube, Stephanie. She talked about something she called the adult gap year, and she talked about it specifically, pointedly, for Black women, the ones who had been holding things up so long they had forgotten what it felt like to set something down. She wasn't selling anything. She was just describing my life back to me in a calm voice and asking what I was going to do about it. I started paying attention. I had always kept a running file, loosely organized, of writing programs and fellowships and residencies, a habit from college, from the years I was supposed to be learning balance sheets and supply chains, but would find myself in the literature section of the university library, reading about retreats in places that sounded like they'd been named by poets. I had never done anything with the file. It had just sat there, a small kept promise. I opened it, a 6-month writing program in the Scottish Highlands near BEW Lee, tutoring, community, dedicated writing time, then another in Balmaha by Loch Lomond, structured writing blended with what the brochure called restorative free time. Restorative. I sat with that word for a long moment. Then I read the sentence again. Something unlocked. I had been saving carefully for years, partly by instinct and partly because I had always known, somewhere below conscious thought, that I might need an exit. I ran the numbers, even accounting for the mortgage, even accounting for the fact that I had been carrying most of the household expenses. I could fund a full year abroad on my own. No Malik, no asking permission, no justifying. 1 year, I started making calls. I waited until Malik was away on another fellowship to make the real decision. He'd been gone 3 weeks. My calls had gone unanswered or were returned after hours of delay, and when I mentioned the silence, he used that word again, needy. That was the last time it landed. I got in touch with both programs, found out that the gap between them could be filled with travel, Europe, unscheduled, belonging only to me. My company, when I finally brought it to my boss, reacted the way I had quietly hoped. She asked how she could structure the leave to make sure I'd come back. I told her a year. She said she'd make it work. She valued me. It was strange being valued out loud. Then I had to tell Malik. I picked a Sunday evening. I had cooked, which in retrospect I can see was a kind of armor, familiar domestic ground, something to do with my hands. I told him I had been burning out. I told him I had been exhausted for a long time and that I needed something that was mine. I told him about the programs, about Scotland, about the year. He went very still. Then, wives don't leave their husbands alone. I looked at him. You've left me alone. Multiple times. That was only a month or two. It was 3 months once, and I never called you needy. His jaw moved. That was for my studies, and this is for my mental health, which I'm deciding is equally important. The word he reached for then was allow. He said he would not allow it. He said it with the full confidence of a man who had never had that word turned around on him. I felt my blood go quiet. Not cold. Quiet. The way a room goes quiet just before the temperature changes. You won't allow it? I said. I kept my voice level. I'm a grown woman. Did you get my permission to travel? He didn't answer that. He didn't have an answer for that. The weeks that followed were a full-court press. Sandra, his mom, called. Malcolm, his brother, called. 2 of my friends called, one of them so thoroughly using Malik's language that I understood the call had been coached. Everyone had a version of the same argument. I was being selfish. I was being reckless. I was abandoning my responsibilities. I needed to think about what this looked like. I thought about what it looked like. It looked like me finally doing something for myself. Nothing moved me. The day I left, Malik was indisposed. That was the word he used in the text he sent at 6 a.m. the morning of my flight. Indisposed. Couldn't take me to the airport. I noted the passive aggression, filed it, and called a car. I landed in Edinburgh on a Tuesday in October. The air was different in a way that felt almost physical. Cooler, cleaner, older somehow, because the city had been breathing longer than anything I'd grown up around. I checked into a small hotel on a side street near Princes Street Gardens and stood at the window looking out at the castle on the hill, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of anyone's expectations on my shoulders. Malik texted that evening. "Where do you keep the coffee I like?" I looked at the message for a moment. Then I looked back out at the castle. "Grocery store," I typed back. "You'll need to go buy more." He didn't reply. The next morning, I walked the length of Princes Street slowly. No destination, no schedule. The gardens sat below the road like a green secret. After hours of walking, I stopped in Newtown and stood in front of rows of Georgian townhouses, honey-colored in the sunset, and perfectly proportioned, and thought about the word restorative. I was already feeling something shift. By the time I took the train north to BEW Lee, Malik had sent 3 more texts. The coffee, the breakfast sausage, the location of the extra light bulbs. I answered them all with a version of the same sentence. Check the store. I was not a concierge. I was not an inventory system. I was a woman on a train, watching Scotland slide past the window in shades of gray and green and amber, and I was, for the first time in years, at peace. I arrived in BEW Lee, which I later found out means beautiful place, and it was a beautiful place. The program in BEW Lee was small, 12 writers, a converted farmhouse, morning workshops, and long, unstructured afternoons. My room had a window that looked out over a field. There was a walking trail that followed the river into the hills. I started taking it every morning before breakfast, slow at first, then longer still. I had forgotten that I was someone who liked to walk. I had forgotten a lot of things about myself. The program reminded me, gently, the way good writing programs do, not by telling you who you are, but by giving you enough silence to hear yourself again. I wrote badly at first, stiff, careful sentences, then looser ones, then, sometime around the 5th week, something that felt true. Meanwhile, Malik's texts had changed in quality. Less practical, more frantic. He had missed the electricity payment. Before I left, I had written out every bill, every due date, every login. A full document, printed and left on the kitchen counter. The electric bill was his one responsibility, just the one. "The power got shut off," he texted. I sat with that for a moment. "Call the utility company," I typed back. "Pay the outstanding balance. They'll restore it within a few hours." His mother called. I let it go to voicemail. His brother texted. I put him on mute. Malik had apparently been posting on social media about being deserted. I unfollowed him and kept walking. 2 months in, I felt my nervous system do something I didn't have a word for. Relax isn't quite right. It was more like decompress. Like a fist that had been clenched for so long it had forgotten it was clenched, slowly, incrementally, opening. I slept well. I ate without thinking about what time it was. I wrote 6,000 words in 1 week and deleted 4,000 of them and felt satisfied with that ratio. Then Malik called. He had never called when he himself was on fellowship. He texted when he needed something, ignored me when he didn't. A phone call meant desperation. Tasha. No, hello. You need to come home. Why? This is your duty as my wife. I looked out the window at the field. The evening light was doing something particular to the hills. How do you manage when you're on fellowship? I asked. Cafeteria, he said. I order out. Then you can manage now, too. My writing matters to me. I'm staying with the program. He hung up. A week later, the text came in while I was on a long hike along the loch. I didn't see it until I was back at the farmhouse, boots off, kettle on. If you don't come back home soon, I'm filing for divorce. I read it twice, set my phone on the table, poured my tea. Then I sat down and did something I had not expected to do. I thought about it. Seriously, clearly, without the fog of guilt that had always moved in whenever I considered the shape of my marriage. I thought, what would I lose? I would lose someone to go to cultural events with. That was real. Malik, whatever else he was, could talk about film and music and art with fluency, and I had valued that. What else? I sat with the question for a long time. The fire in the small sitting room crackled. Outside, the hills went dark. I kept coming back to the same answer, which was, not much. He had stopped adding to my life somewhere around year 2 and had been subtracting ever since. What I felt when I imagined going back was not longing. It was exhaustion. Just fatigue. I didn't respond that night. 2 hours later. Did you see my text? Yes. Well? When are you coming back? And the thought of it, of going back, of his hovering, of the furniture chosen without me, of Sandra's thin-mouthed comments, of Malcolm and the weekends that always ended the same way, settled over me like something heavy. I'm staying, I typed. If you want to file, that's your prerogative. Silence for 2 days. I knew it was a bluff. He needed me paying the mortgage. He needed me organizing the bills, stocking the kitchen, making the logistics of his life invisible and frictionless. He had never once made mine easier. Not once. On the 3rd day, that was just a threat. You know I love you, but it's harder when you're not here. There it was. The softest possible version of, please come back and be useful. I remembered all the times he had been demeaning to me in front of his university associates, said things to belittle me in front of his family. I always thought divorce came with arguments, slammed doors, and hostile silences, but just because this wasn't like that, did that make it any less real or true? Should I accept a half-life because I felt guilty or unworthy of following my own dreams? I thought about it for a month, walked the loch, wrote, sat in the farmhouse evenings and listened to the other writers talk about their lives and felt, for the first time, like I was in mine, fully in it. Then I called a divorce lawyer. She was based in California. She worked with clients remotely. She was brisk and practical and didn't ask me to justify myself, which I appreciated more than I could say. I texted Malik on a Thursday morning from a bench by the river with the hills behind me and a pale autumn sky above. Let's divorce. The response was immediate and multi-layered. Him, then Sandra, then Malcolm. A 3-part symphony of disbelief and accusation, and the particular brand of emotional pressure that had been managing my life for 5 years. I read the messages once, then I put my phone in my pocket and watched the river for a while. His anger came next. Long texts, some of them repeating themselves, then the practical panic. How am I supposed to pay for rent somewhere else? I thought about that for a moment. Then I thought about the security deposit on our first apartment, which I had paid from my savings, about the mortgage which I had carried, about the bonuses that had quietly gone into keeping our household afloat, while Malik circled the drain of his next research phase. Maybe, I thought, he should have considered that before sending the threat. We sold the house. He got half the proceeds. He had not paid the mortgage once, but I was willing to pay for a clean break. The furniture I let him have, I didn't want any of it. It had never felt like mine anyway. A few boxes of my clothes and books went into storage. My lawyer handled the rest with an efficiency that I found deeply, privately satisfying. And then it was done. I stayed through both programs, BEW Lee to Balmaha, with 3 weeks in between where I took a train to Amsterdam and then to Lisbon, and ate dinner alone at good restaurants and walked until my feet ached and felt something I had to keep relearning the name for. Joy, it was joy. Back in the writing program, I finished a first draft of something that might become a book. 40,000 words, rough and alive. My instructor said it had a voice. I had not heard that said about my work since my junior year of college by a professor who had looked at me after workshop and said, quietly, "You should keep going." I had filed that sentence away the same place I filed the retreat programs. It had been waiting. After the divorce was finalized and I had returned back to California, my life looked ordinary in all the ways I had stopped believing ordinary could feel. A small apartment in a neighborhood I had chosen. A kitchen arranged the way I wanted it. A bookshelf organized by something other than aesthetic. By memory, by feeling. By this one, changed me. At work, without the ambient noise of a marriage that was really just a system for managing someone else's comfort, my focus returned. Sharp as glass. I got the promotion I had been quietly angling toward for years. Malik had moved back to his parents. Sandra, I had always called her Sandra, but in my head she had finally become just his mother, had apparently required him to pay rent for his old bedroom. His father had quietly closed the credit card. The universe balances its own ledgers. Someone sent me a screenshot of his dating app profile eventually. His bio listed entrepreneur, visionary. The photos showed our old furniture, the rugs, the throw pillows. Someone in the comments had recognized it. "Isn't that your condo that your ex took everything from?" The account disappeared the next day. I did not feel triumphant. I felt nothing, which is its own kind of peace. The espresso machine gleamed on the counter. My espresso machine. Every morning when I used it, I thought about the day I had researched, selected, and bought it, something all my own that I had chosen, not with triumph, with clarity. That was the day I stopped apologizing for owning what I earned. The day I stopped mistaking patience for permission. The day I stopped filling in gaps that weren't mine to fill. Outside, the city moved. I leaned against the counter and let the steam rise. Today is the day I stopped carrying what was handed to me. The tea cooled slowly. I didn't rush it. Some mornings, that's enough. Some mornings, that is everything.